Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, another special edition of the Terrible Podcast, Pittsburgh Steelers Training Camp 2022. I am Dave Bryan from SteelersDepot.com. It is August the 18th. It is 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. On the other end of this is the great Alex Kozora, who just wrapped up another year of training camp practices. Obviously, these were mostly out at Saint Vincent College in Latrobe. Training camp is now over as far as the public practices go. They, I believe, might have a walkthrough in the morning before loading up and traveling to Jacksonville for their second preseason game, which is, of course, Saturday night on the road in Jacksonville. So with that, Alex, happy end of training camp. Happy Thursday. Happy football Thursday as well.
Happy all of that, Dave. And it was a picture-perfect final day of Steelers training camp. A pretty low-key practice, similar to yesterday. Pittsburgh was in pads today, but more scout team, game plan, prep kind of stuff, as opposed to more of the competition period. But the weather was great. The crowd was fantastic. And again, just really happy that we're back at Latrobe and could celebrate, a full training camp in Latrobe at Saint Vincent. It was a really fun year.
Yeah, I guess really the only down point about this whole thing was the whole Friday Night Lights thing getting rained out there. And I think you had one more practice, wasn't there? That was moved, I think. And,
right, the day after.
Right, the day after there. So overall, not bad. It's good for the crowd and the fans and you and everyone to get back out there to Saint Vincent College in Latrobe. So, all right, let's get this final special edition of the Terrible Podcast going. And as we usually like to do at the top, thank the sponsor this year, which once again has been Touring Plans at Touring Plans and touringplans.com, and the great Lynn Test over there. So shout them out one final time here, Alex.
Absolutely cannot thank Len and Touring Plans enough for their support, not just this year, but for many, many years. I think almost, if not all the years we've done training camp coverage, Touring Plans and Len in particular have reached out to us and said, can we partner up? We don't do a ton of sponsorships, and so we are a little picky and choosy. We want to make sure it's quality people and a good company, and that's what Len and Touring Plans, that's who they are. And so if you're planning a trip to Disney, as you've heard me say at the start of all of these special edition of the podcasts, recaps. If you're planning a trip to Disney, those are the people you want to work with just to best determine your schedule and your itinerary and your plan for a very stressful time of year, especially if you have a big family and you have a bunch of kids you're trying to make the haul to Disney. Touring Plans is the team that you want to work with. So cannot thank those guys enough. Again, you can visit their site, touringplans.com, and they're also on Twitter at Touring Plans. So if you go there, tell them Len Testa and Steelers Depot sent you.
Absolutely do that. And with this being the final show, if you get a chance and you listen to this and you're on Twitter, shout them out at Touring Plans and let them know. Thank you for sponsoring these special edition podcasts here. All right, Alex, a little bit of an injury scare today for the Steelers, and I'll let you, being you have all the firsthand information with that, I'll let you cover that, and also go over, even though Mike Tomlin spoke to the media earlier in the day, did not address the media post-practice, as is usually the case. Got a pretty good makeshift injury report put together off of what you observed out there on this Thursday.
Right. Big news, scary news at the time of the day is Cam Hayward in that ankle injury. Long story short, the one-sentence version, Cam Hayward suffering an ankle injury during the 7 shots period, but he seems to be okay. It seems to be relatively minor, so I don't see this as something that's going to impact him long-term, but it was a third play, 7 shots, a run play. They were in pads. It was not a tackle session. Hayward, as he would tell reporters after the fact, got rolled up on at the end of the run. He was down on the field for about a minute, walked off slowly and gingerly under his own power, though, got examined by head trainer John Norwick looking at his left ankle. put his shoe back on, walked around briefly, took his shoe back off, got his left ankle iced and wrapped up by a different trainer, and then he ended up being carted off around 3:15-ish, and then came back down late in practice. So it seems to be an ankle sprain of some variety. It seems to be more minor than serious, considering he was walking around, putting his shoe on, walking to the car, returning to the field. I couldn't tell exactly the nature of the ankle injury, but it seems to be more short-term than long-term. I would not expect him to play in this weekend's game, but I'm guessing his week 1 availability is still going to be good. Pittsburgh he did not suffer a serious injury that's going to really threaten his status for the Bengals game.
Right. They'll probably just take it easy on him now up until week 1. We'll see if he maybe gets any action at all in the preseason finale, but I kind of doubt that he will at this point, but stranger things have happened. All right. Who else missed practice and who else was limited and who else was back?
A relatively short list of guys not working for a final day of training camp. No Calvin Austin with that foot injury. No Arthur Millette due to a hamstring pull. No Montravius Adams with the ankle. Alex Highsmith with the ribs. And Larry Ogunjobi back-to-back days undisclosed. So I'm not guessing those are 2 rest days, but it seems to be relatively minor overall. Marcus Allen, Derek Watt continued to work in limited fashion. Isaiah Lattimore did dress. I don't know if I saw him in team, but he definitely dressed and was in pads, had a helmet, so he was at least limited, which is a good sign after the rib injury he suffered yesterday. So overall, just 5 players not practicing at all. Now there was a roster move with Master Teague being waived injured and Max Borghi being signed, and so that's unfortunate for Teague there. He had a pretty strong summer overall, but relatively speaking, Pittsburgh in good shape health-wise to end training camp.
Those 2 guys limited. Derek Watt with his shoulder and Marcus Allen still. Both those guys with the hamstring. Marcus Allen working way back. You think either of those 2 guys are going to see action Saturday night? And what about the did not practice guys? You probably would bet that they're not going to play.
Right. I can't see maybe an Ogunjobi if this is kind of more rest, but I think the other guys are all going to sit out. Allen and Watt, they are more veteran type of guys, so they may not need the practice time that, say, a Calvin Austin would need to have. But if I had to guess, tomorrow's a walkthrough, I'd bet against Allen and Watt playing. Maybe Watt would have a better chance, but I think leaning towards both sitting this one out.
And we'll see what happens with Najee Harris. I think he kind of insinuated that he won't play, but Mike Tomlin fashion, kind of left the light on for that. We'll obviously see what happens with him, but he's been back doing his kind of normal work, right?
Right. He's 100%. He's good to go now. It's just a decision of, do you play him and how much do you play him? Mike Tomlin at his presser today, and we'll talk about that more tomorrow, I'm sure, on the regular edition of the podcast. But Tomlin saying he agrees with Harris that Harris wants to play and should play this preseason. What that looks like and when that looks like, I'm not quite sure.
All right. Position group by position group. I know it was probably a real similar practice to the Wednesday session, so probably not going to be able to be overly thorough here or have just a lot of new information for the folks. But how did the quarterbacks look today? And Kenny Pickett is now, according to Mike Tomlin, going to be the second quarterback in the game Saturday night against the Jaguars. Probably should be working with the first team offensive line, and we'll see about hopefully all those starting receivers are out there for him. Hopefully Freiermuth's out there as well. How did the group of quarterbacks look today?
Fine overall. Don't have many particular notes on those guys. Just to say that Chris Oldokun got more reps again. I think you have to take your shoes off now to count his reps this camp, so that's good. Although his play, and I understand he's probably really rusty in his first 2 days, and he's looking kind of the way that Kenny Pickett looked to start his training camp, several weeks ago in terms of accuracy being really spotty and throwing off his back foot and things like that. So the very, very small evaluation of Chris Oldokun has not been positive so far, but just getting reps and getting some of those, opportunities is the most important thing.
All right. Who's pushing the football down the field? Mitch pushed it down the field a little bit today. Kenny, any of them?
Yeah, I think I know Mitch did. I I think they all kind of did.
There's a slot fade in there somewhere to Claypool, wasn't it?
Right, and that was from Trubisky, and that was a really good throw. Again, some of this, when it's more scout team and more game plan, it can be a bit of we're intentionally doing some of these things. You kind of feel the rhythm of kind of each session being the same in terms of what routes would be called and in the order in which they would come and things like that. But yeah, I think that Rudolph and Trubisky have been able to push the ball downfield and pick it to maybe a lesser degree. Overall, Oldokun did have one deep shot, which was basically into triple coverage and thrown incomplete. But how much of that is game plan and kind of dictated, that's a little bit more of a gray area. I would say overall, Mason Rudolph, Trubisky have most consistently pushed the ball deep downfield, but Pickett has seen progression there throughout training camp.
Any interceptions today?
Was there a pick? No, I don't think there was. Jannard Avery should have had one. Mason Rudolph booted to his left and missed Sternberger, and Avery he fought the football. He batted it down, basically. He should have picked that one, but I don't believe there was an actual interception today. Okay.
Note to self, slot fade to Claypool
Your favorite.
Jaguars. I love that. And
yep. And in a big slot, that's a great concept to have. Sometimes with a smaller guy, might be a little tougher to do, but a big guy like Claypool, those are the routes that he can really become effective on.
I'm a fan of Claypool being in the slot. You know that. I don't need to remind you or the listeners.
But you will remind me. But I'm aware.
Yeah, I won't remind you again in this show.
Yeah, in this show, or the fine print on that one.
How's he looking in the slot? All right.
Yeah, I mean, again, sometimes when you're not tackling and, how old is a guy running an option route on third down, knowing a linebacker is going to blast him or safety's going to come down and cut it and pop you, those are the things that kind of make slot receivers. And again, Claypool has been limited by injury, and so it's kind of been a bit stunted in terms of reps and opportunities and looks and things like that. But obviously, there's a mismatch possibility there. It's just, can you be a more precise route runner? Can you be a really reliable, hands catcher the way that Juju was in his career in Pittsburgh? Those are the things I really focus on. But understanding that Pat Frymuth, the way that he did last year after Juju got hurt, basically became this team's, 5-yard choice route, third down, gotta have it type of dude. And so maybe that'll allow Claypool to not have to be that guy quite as often, knowing that Frymuth's kind of going to be that sliding into that role more so than maybe what Claypool will have to do.
All right, we're already talking about wide receivers. A few people in your timeline, I think, asking, why is it so quiet about George Pickens the last couple of days? That's not a concern or anything, right?
No, and it has been quiet, so I recognize that. He had a jump ball fade in 7 shots that he nearly plucked off of Levi Wallace. Initially caught it, but could not finish the catch, and the ball rolled away as he went to the ground. But there's ebb and flow to it all. I'm not really that concerned in that aspect about Pickens. I think there are things in his game to work on, but nothing that's happened this week that's putting up any sort of alarm bells.
Who's in that next tier of wide receivers, practice squad guys? Sims and Cody White. And
Tyler Vaughn.
Tyler Vaughn. Tell me about that group.
Right. I mean, they're still kind of figuring that stuff out, and each guy brings something different. Steven Sims brings, he's not really he's played more outside than he has in the slot, but he's certainly a guy that, has open field ability. We saw that in the Seattle game. He's got kick and punt return value, so there's a potential backup to Gunner should something ever happen to Olszewski. Cody White's more of a special teams guy, more versatile. He can play all 3 receiver spots, maybe a bit better blocker overall. Tyler Vaughn's is, more of a quick twitch type of dude, does not have great long speed, not a tremendous athlete overall, but is a pretty, fine and precise route runner in terms of selling vertical and running curls and things like that. So they're all really battling. I don't know exactly who I would give the edge to right now. I think Sims could make it for having some of that return value as well, should something happen to Gunnar Olszewski, but that's a story that'll probably be written the next 2 weeks.
All right. Running back position. Should we expect Jaylen Warren to be either the starter or the second one in the game, I guess, depending on what happens maybe with Benny Snell and, and obviously Najee Harris?
I think that's a reasonable assumption and expectation. There'll be a rotation there. I don't know exactly how it's going to go, and some of the scout team stuff this week has made that a little more difficult to discern, but certainly Warren will get a ton of opportunity in this game, and he'll probably be playing sooner than he did last week. He'll be getting some first half action, and maybe there's a rotation with him and McFarland. And, I don't know exactly how it's going to look because what the last game you didn't have Najee, you didn't have Snell available. So I just want to see how it looks. But certainly Warren's going to get a pretty good opportunity in this game.
I think reading the tea leaves alone with the signing of Max and assuming Benny Snell's able to play any in this game, that's probably a good sign that probably Najee won't, right?
I guess. I mean, but Tomlin's comment is that he agrees with Harris that he wants to give him carries. And are they going to come in the finale? I don't know. Again, if Harris does play, it'll be a very limited amount of snaps, 5 snaps or fewer, get a carry or 2 first drive. So even if he does play, it's a small piece of him playing.
All right. I'm excited to see more Warren for sure and I'd like to see Benny try to get out there and get a couple of carries in this one as well too. And see if McFarland is more than just Mr. August,
Right. As Tomlin said, I think for the young guys in particular, it probably matters less for Snell, but can you stack good performances? This is all about how you start and how you finish. And it's about how you respond. If you struggle, it's about how do you build upon if you do well. And certainly Warren, fumble aside, did well in the opener. Same with Anthony McFarland, who can stack those good games, not just be a one-game star that fades and rides that roller coaster. I think Warren, the tea leaves indicate Warren's going to come in pretty early in this game. He was generally speaking running ahead of McFarland and Snell during this past week. But how it looks on game day, given that Snell and McFarland are more veteran guys, I'm not quite sure how that's going to go. But certainly McFarland and Warren will get their chances to build upon what they did against Seattle.
All right. How about tight ends now? Connor's still showing those sticky hands, right?
He has. He's really consistently plucked the ball away from his frame. I think he's had a really good final week of camp, maybe some more inconsistency a bit earlier on, and there's still questions about size and blocking limitations and things like that. But just as a natural athlete, just a quote-unquote football player, he's a good route runner with good bursts at the top of his route. He plucks away from his frame. He's got really soft hands overall. He can catch outside his frame. He's a shorter guy, and so I think some of these quarterbacks have to get used to throwing to a tight end who's 5'11" and not a 6'4", 6'5" kind of guy. I think that happened once in the Seattle game where Rudolph kind of overthrew Connor Hayward. But overall, Hayward's just a very natural football player, natural catcher of the football, and he's just a smooth guy overall.
Freiermuth look healthy now?
Yeah, he's good. He's been back for a week plus. I mean, it's a healthy tight end group. Gentry's back. Rader and Sternberger and Hayward have all been very durable. The rookies in general have been really durable in training camp, whether you're talking Pickett, obviously, but that's kind of a different case with a quarterback. But George Pickens, I know that Austin's been hurt, but Leal and Hayward and Mark Robinson, a lot of guys who have not missed a lot of time, and that's just good to get reps and not fall behind that moving train.
All right, offensive line. Mike Tomlin said this morning that Kendrick Green's going to get the start again at left guard, and I assume that this time, however, that Kevin Dotson will follow him into the game. Is this more motivation for Kevin Dotson, or and how's the rest of the offensive line look?
It's a good question. I was going to ask you because I really don't have any notes on the O-line. There was no O-line, D-line today, as was the case yesterday. Do you think they'll rotate the way they rotate in camp in the sense of every other series will be a different left guard? Will it be Green working the whole time with the starters? I really don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how much there is to read into Kendrick Green starting at left guard again. I would have thought it would have been Kevin Dotson just based on him missing last week, but I don't really know how to interpret what that means.
I don't either. From where I sit and from what Tomlin said, I will only answer the way that my feelings were before this even camp got started. If we get to week 1 and Kevin Dotson's not the starter, that's a huge disappointment overall. It means that you probably have missed on this guy, or something's there that they don't like that's preventing him to get in there.
Right. That's a fair point. Where our thought was if Dotson should be running away with that job. Yeah. I know injuries impacted that, but he has not been running away with a job, and so that in itself may be a concern for Kevin Dotson. It's
very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. If we get, hopefully he gets in this game against Jacksonville and there's a notable difference in there, because look, under the lights is what matters, right? Mike, that's what Mike Tomlin says. And obviously Dotson wasn't under the lights in that first game. So if he suits up, he better make the most of his opportunities against Jacksonville.
Sure, that happened last year though against the Eagles. Whenever he missed all that time and came in and had a really good game against Philadelphia, really dominant run blocker, and that settled those concerns down. But obviously, for sure, Dotson has to look good in this game so he can really start to separate himself.
All right, the rest of the offensive line.
Not much to note overall. Pretty much status quo there again. It's pretty tough to evaluate overall today. Better job with the snaps and clean exchanges and things like that. So that's good.
All right, defensive line guys.
Not much to really note outside of the Cam Hayward injury, and with a lot of it was limited some. So some of those defensive linemen might be getting some more opportunities and more snaps. And the Marvin Leal could certainly be in line for a fair amount of playing time this weekend. But beyond that, probably not a lot to note today.
Does Tyson look healthy? Do you think we're going to see any Tyson Alualu in this game?
I think so. I believe Tomlin said all healthy players will play, and Tyson's healthy and moving around fine. So I think he'll play maybe 2-3 drives in this game.
All right. Inside linebacker, anything there?
Buddy Johnson just always seems to be a step and a tick slow, especially in coverage. It's just he's in the area, he's close, but Connor Hayward caught one on him today. Some other plays on some tight ends that are running, slants and stick routes and stuff like that. Just he's always a bit slow. It feels like with Buddy Johnson. So that's been my overall evaluation of him specifically in coverage.
If Marcus Allen gets healthy by week 1, is this and they keep 5 inside in total, is this a race between now him and Buddy Johnson?
I think so, and I'm giving the edge. Wait, a race between who? Buddy Johnson and Mark Robinson?
Marcus Allen.
Oh, with Marcus Allen. Well, I don't want to write Robinson's name in pen either. I think right now I'm kind of leaning towards Allen still making it. He will be healthy by week 1. He'll be healthy. He's pretty close to that right now. They're just always cautious with hamstring injuries and things like that. So, I don't want to necessarily put Allen's name in pen either, but I still think he's going to make it, given that maybe special teams and that Robinson and Johnson have had their moments, but have not been overwhelmingly good. And then UG3 gets hurt, and that's a name that gets eliminated from the race there. So I still view this as Johnson versus Robinson, really who can be a good special teams player. Robinson, he had a really bad rep on a kick return, and he let this guy go by, and it led to McFarland being tackled, I think, before the 25. And so there's work to do for him there. And then with Allen, you go back to, why do we care about this stuff? The up back. I go back to the special teams film from that Seahawks game, the first punt of the game, Trey Norwood, the new up back, miscommunication with him and Christian Kuntz, should have been blocked. And so you kind of see why you want a really strong, known presence in a guy like Marcus Allen.
Outside linebacker, tell me about what's going on with Derek Tushka.
It's really more of the same. I mean, I think he talked about today his comfort level, and I'm sure that's true. Guys who get to have a full off season with the team, full spring, full training camp, not catching the moving train the way that he was after the injuries hit the edge guys last year, and TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith early in the season. But he's generally assignment sound. He works hard. This sounds very cliche to say, and this is kind of the very generic scouting report, but he's just not. I'm not seeing a ton from him, maybe a little bit, here and there in terms of him winning off the edge, but I'm not seeing a lot of defining traits, and that's why I'm more comfortable with him being the number 4 outside linebacker on this team as opposed to that top backup. And again, I think Avery right now is in position to be that top backup.
Okay. Defensive backs, anything there?
The note I have here is on Trey Norwood, who's had a really strong summer overall.
That's good to hear too.
It is. He played well against Seattle. He's had multiple breakups over the last couple of practices, at least one today. And so he's the guy that has been working as that 6DB, that dime defender, start to finish at camp. Even when Minkah Fitzpatrick came back healthy, they tried to work Demonte Casey in a couple different ways, but even in dime packages with Minkah out there, it's been Norwood over Casey. His physicality and tackling, I think, has improved a bit from where it was last year. He's been a more downhill, physical, quick trigger kind of force. And so I've been encouraged by what he's done overall. And Pittsburgh certainly, found a pretty good player in the 7th round.
Is Miles Killebrew safe?
Less than I thought he would be. He's worked in team, but he's been really running back of the pack, very much distant third string kind of thing. If they keep 10 DBs, he probably is. But if they do keep 9, then there may be a question because Casey should make it. Norwood's going to make it. Obviously, Edmonds and Minkah's going to make it. And so, his his odds have faded from where it was. It's maybe 60% chance he makes it, but he's not in as strong a position as he was at the start of training camp.
All right, and Justin Lane, as far as cornerback goes, it's still feeling like he's done, right?
Right. I mean, he put on some good tape, I thought, Saturday on special teams, but just with where he's running right now, and they like Millette a lot, and Pierre's had a good camp overall, it might be a numbers game for Justin Lane.
All right, what else do we have? Any Harvin booming a few more today?
He did. I didn't have any hang times timed and charted for you guys, so sorry for that. But just watching them and being there as at camp as long as I have been, I kind of can get a good feel and good ear and eye to a good punt versus a bad punt, and he looked pretty strong overall. So I want to see him do it inside a stadium. Now that Nizelik's been cut, he'll be the only punter, I assume, unless Skiba is going to do something, but it should be Harvin, so it'll be his show Saturday and next weekend.
All right. You think real quick, the second team offensive line going to look a lot similar to the one that we saw in the first preseason game? Sands, maybe Dotson being the left guard instead of Chaz Green.
Right. I mean, it should be Haig. Let's assume Dotson, Hassenauer, LeGlue, and then probably Trent Scott in right tackle. That should be your second team offensive line.
I'm laughing because I don't want to see no more Chaz Green out there.
I hear you.
All right, Alex. How about for today and an overreaction?
These last 2 days have been so much quieter. It's really hard to learn a lot from the evaluation process. Other than, and this is probably not really an overreaction, but Kenny Pickett, to me, is in that driver's seat to be the number 2 quarterback. Obviously, he will be Saturday, but for week 1 against the Bengals. And he's been the number 2 all week, and he's done well, and they're really happy with him. So if your first-round quarterback has a good camp and a good preseason, how could he be any worse than the number 2 on your roster come week 1? And so I think, the way that it was Mitch Trubisky's job to lose to be the number 1, it's now Kenny Pickett's job to lose to be anything worse than number 2 for the Bengals game.
Is this more about Kenny winning it as opposed to Mason losing it?
Absolutely. I think Mason's had a good camp overall. And then through the first 2 weeks, I said Mason Rudolph was the best quarterback at camp. Now, who's been the best guy overall now? I had to think about that. Some of my camp grades will come out starting either Friday or Saturday. But Kenny Pickett has earned that spot. He has left him. Not that Rudolph's done anything wrong or egregiously bad. It's just that Pickett's a first-round quarterback who has played well, who's shown progression, who's playing within structure, making some plays outside of structure as well. And he deserves that number 2 spot.
All right, we'll have a pretty healthy discussion, I have a feeling, about the quarterback position on the Friday morning terrible podcast. So don't want to spend too much time on that. Overall, overarching thoughts on the 2022 Steelers coming out of training camp with 2 preseason games left to go.
I suppose they're not too terribly different than what they were going in. Still questions about your overall quarterback play, and can you get consistently, high-level play compared to the rest of the AFC and AFC North in particular, an offensive line that isn't making me feel a lot better than where I was. I think they're a better run blocking unit than a pass blocking unit overall right now, but there's going to be up and down and inconsistent play there. Obviously impressed with some of the rookies. With Pickett, you feel better about than where I was before training camp. Pickens, of course, you feel a lot better about and really, really encouraged by the progress that he's made. But overall, I think, you look at health, they're generally a healthy group overall. Not a lot of guys who missed a ton of time during training camp. So the offensive line, for example, getting a ton of reps together, that's good. That's important. That's going to pay off come regular season. So I don't know if I have a singular big takeaway overall. I guess I'm generally in the same place I was, heading into training camp, but just watching a guy like George Pickens, you sit there and say, this guy could be a star if it all kind of comes together. And if he just rounds out the edges and things like that. So that might be my main takeaway is Pittsburgh may have found themselves another, great and a long line of really talented receivers.
Is there any big, huge surprise to you? One single surprise coming out of this camp?
I think James Daniels struggles, to be honest. Again, a guy that I thought really would have a strong camp and show why they paid him all that money and would be this team's best offensive lineman. And I understand it's there's a newness and very early in this process, and he may settle in by week 1. Whenever you come to a new team, a new coach, new scheme, all that kind of stuff. So I qualify everything I'm saying now with that information in mind. But that's a guy that, in not a good way, obviously, is surprising me based on his overall camp play.
All right. Man, these, when they start off, it seems like, man, we got to do a lot of these things, but here we are at the end of them. I think we have done, this is the 16th. This might be a record, I think. 16 special editions of the Terrible Podcast. And how many years have you been out to training camp now, Alex?
2015. So I guess excluding 2020, whatever we're at now, 6-7 years.
Well, Father Time has not caught up with you yet.
Am I getting my veteran rest day soon, like the other guys? No?
Yeah, maybe a lighter day on Friday or Saturday morning or something like that. We'll work out something, but no, seriously. And I think that the response on Twitter shows it all. And I mean, the listenership numbers and the site numbers. I mean, no, you are singly, the best at what you do out there and on the site. And I appreciate, look, I'm selfish here. I love to use you as my own filter, and we just let 30,000 other people listen in. So I certainly appreciate you and the job that you did out there once again. And I have learned quite a bit about this team through your notes and through your eyes and through your tweets, and I appreciate that. I'm sure the listeners do as well. So from me to you, thank you and another great job. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and thank you, Dave, for all the work you do. I know you have to kind of hold down the fort while I run out and play with the rest of the crowd there and watch training camp. And there's a lot going on during the site, and it's been as busy as ever. I know the other day we got hit with so many interviews. You got Con talking, Weidel talking, players talking, and you being able to spearhead that and juggle. That's been really great to see in the team that everyone has done, from Jonathan, Joe, and Josh, and the whole group has been fantastic. So I think the site's in a really good direction, and certainly the reason why our camp coverage works and the reason why we've been out there every single year is because of the readers and the listeners and the people that say hello and really care about the nuances and who is the up back and who is running this team and who's progressing and those kinds of things, all the small details. If no one cared, then we would not be where we're at today. And so really thankful for that. And so many people who have said a kind word, and almost consistently every single day, at least one or two or many people coming up and saying, hey, we listen to the podcast, we read the site, your coverage is fantastic. And that's always really rewarding to hear. That makes it, sound like we're doing something impactful and meaningful. And again, my goal at training camp has always been to make the reader or the listener feel like they're sitting next to me at camp if they can't be there. Steelers Nation is everywhere. Not everyone can attend Latrobe, PA. And I think we've done our job in terms of making people feel like they sat next to us this entire summer.
I would agree. And I know I certainly feel that way every day and every night and every late night when doing these. So, all right, you and I will be back at this again Friday morning for a regular edition of the Terrible Podcast, and have a lot to talk about, quarterbacks and who may or may not play and guys to look at and closer this weekend. So back to normal again. So within all that, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. And also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, we have that available. You can find that in the top navigational bar to the right on SteelersDepot.com. So until next summer, at least, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast, special edition of the Terrible Podcast, Pittsburgh Steelers Training Camp 2022 with Dave and Alex. Good night.